Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents A Dog Day's Night, A Dog Day's Mystery by Jamie Blair, narrated by Johanna Parker. Chapter 1. Dogs can hear 4 times farther than humans, so when my 5-pack of fur bounded for the northwest corner of the backyard fence and started barking and howling, I knew something was making its way to town. The rumbling of engines caught my ears a minute later. There were motorcycles out on Route 52, and a lot of them. A few people around Metamora rode one, but this wasn't the sound of a couple local guys out on a Saturday mid-morning ride to take in the October foliage in its blazing glory of color, or maybe on their way to the Cornerstone Bar to catch a college football game. Either way, it wasn't my neighbors. There were too many for that. This was an invasion. "You hear that?" Will Atkins asked, running over from his antique shop next door. "Yeah, the dogs went nuts. There has to be at least 20 bikes coming this way." "What's that called? A rally?" "I think so." He rubbed his arms and looked across the canal. "I don't think there's anything to worry about," I said. He seemed to need reassuring. Will was skittish by nature. He once left town because he thought I was a murderer. Didn't he feel dumb when I was the one who solved the case? "I better call Reed and reread and warn Brenda. You should take the dogs and get inside." "Okay, thanks, Will," I said. I watched him go. I wasn't locking my dogs inside on a warm fall day because of a bunch of motorcycles riding into town, albeit extremely loud motorcycles. My teeth began rattling together the closer the bikes got. It wasn't like the Hells Angels were taking up residence in Metamora, Indiana. Whatever was going on would be easily explained. The first few bikes buzzed into view and crossed the bridge over the canal, and they kept coming and coming. I counted 40 before deciding keeping count was futile. The dogs gave up barking as well. There was no end in sight to the 2-wheeled, ear-busting decibels zooming across the canal. I was afraid the wooden bridge would give out underneath them. Metamora Mike, the town duck and feathered mascot, flew up onto the bank, flapping his wings and jarring his neck, hissing at the unexpected ruckus. The Belgian draft horses that pulled the Ben Franklin III down the canal from the banks stood in their stalls, stamping their hooves and shaking their heads. Curious to see where the riders were going, I squeezed past the dogs and through the fence gate, leaving them staring after me with tilted heads and wondering expressions. "I'll be right back," I told them. Gus, my giant Newfoundland, gave me a soft bark goodbye. Brutus, my police officer husband Ben's canine partner, stood at attention, ever vigilant. Colby and Jack, the twin terrier terrors, snarled and barked at each other, too busy playing to care if I was there or not. And then there was little Liam, the Maltese Yorkie. He put one tiny paw up on the fence and whined, like he feared I might not return. "Liam, I'll be quick, I promise." I hustled through the side yard to the road and speed-walked along the canal. My neighbors and business owners were all emerging out from indoors, as well as to see what all the commotion was about. The bikes were bunched up, stopping a few at a time at the grist mill. Then they'd move on again, out toward Route 52. Across the canal, Brenda Lefferts exited her bookshop, saw me, and waved. She and Will had been dating for years, and she was the half of the pair who had a backbone. I saw her lift her phone and jab her finger at the screen. Then my phone rang in my back pocket. I'd started carrying it back there when I got tired of digging in the dregs of my handbag to find it. But now I always ended up sitting on it, or losing it when I sat down. "Hello?" I said, answering. "Hey," Brenda said. "Roy's the one causing this mess." Looking over at her, I shook my head. "What do you mean?" "He's out there in front of the mill with old Dan and Frank Gardner, and they're passing out something to the bikers." Roy Lancaster was one of my Metamora Action Agency workers. There were 3 of us now when we used to be 6 in the beginning. We were tasked with planning events for the town. Whatever Roy was hosting today, he'd planned on his own. "I'll get to the bottom of this," I said. "I have a mystery novel put aside for you," she said, "so stop over and get it." Brenda knew my taste in books and always picked ones I devoured. As soon as this parade ends, I'll be over." I hung up and tucked my phone back in my pocket. Metamora Mike was still having a hissy fit, and I didn't want to get too close to his territory. So I took a detour into Grandma's cookie cutter to wait out the motorcycle brigade. "Quite a racket out there," Betty Underwood said, turning to see me come in. "You're just in time for a double chocolate sea salt cookie, fresh from the oven." Betty's black hair was faded to a dark shade of blue, so I knew her granddaughter, Cass, had dyed it the last time. "Double chocolate? That's right up my alley," I said. "You better take a couple then," she said, handing them over the counter to me in a napkin. "What's going on out there?" "I'm not sure yet. A bunch of motorcycles are stopping in front of the grist mill for some reason." "Oh, it must be the poker run that Roy was asking me to take part in." "Poker run? What's a poker run?" I asked, taking a bite of warm cookie. "This could be the best thing I've ever put in my mouth, by the way. I'm glad you like it. I can put a dozen aside for you if you want." "Yes, please." She put her oven mitts on and reached for the oven door. "A poker run is when a motorcycle group makes stops at predetermined places, and someone gives each of them a playing card. At the end of the poker run, the person with the best poker hand wins." "That's what this is?" I asked, gesturing to the door. "How is Roy involved?" "It's a motorcycle group of people who are recovering alcoholics. He knows a few of them from his meetings." "So Roy's doing something good and not just stirring up trouble?" Betty laughed. "Roy's always stirring up trouble, no matter what he's doing." "You can say that again." I wrapped the second cookie in the napkin and tucked it in my sweatshirt pocket for later. "I'm going to head over and see Brenda while I'm out. Half the town was outside watching what was going on. I'll stop back in on my way home to get those cookies. I'll get them boxed up." I pushed through the door of Grandma's cookie cutter and saw that the string of motorcycles had passed. The last dozen were at the grist mill, where several of my neighbors had gathered, including Brenda. Taking the wooden bridge over the canal, I hustled across to the mill.
"Cameron Cripps Hayman,"
Roy said, grinning ear to ear.
"Out and about, are we?"
Roy always used my first and last name. At first it was because he was suspicious of me as a newcomer to town, and an unfortunate misunderstanding made me a murder suspect. Now he used it as a term of familiarity, and I think out of habit. "The noise brought me out and about," I said. "Betty said it was a poker run?"
"Exactly,"
he said.
"The Night Hounds are raising money for our addiction program. Old Dan and Frank here were nice enough to let us use the mill as a stop on the run."
Old Dan was wiggling a finger in his ear.
"What's that?" "He said we were nice to let the poker run stop here,"
Frank shouted to his dad, standing right beside him. Old Dan shook his head.
"What now?"
Frank just shook his head. Elena Nelson. Well, I suppose it was Elena Gardner now, since she and old Dan got married a few months ago, pranced over in her highlighter orange patent leather shoes. Between the two of them, they had over 180 years accumulated in this town. "Did you see the motorbikes?" she asked me. "One of those fellas is buying Ike's old building." Ike's Candle Company had gone out of business a while back, and the building had stood empty since. It was one row back from the canal, situated diagonally behind my sister's dog boutique, Dog Diggity. "What's he putting in there?" I asked. "A bike shop?"
"A bar," Roy said. "The Night Hounds need somewhere to hang out without the temptation of alcohol."
"A bar that doesn't serve alcohol?" Brenda asked. "Isn't that a bad business plan?"
"Not when your customer base is the group that just pulled through here," Roy said. "They'll keep Griller and Bingo's place open."
"Who are Griller and Bingo?" Elena asked. "Those are fancy names. Not as fancy as Grandma Diggity, but pretty close." Elena and my sister Monica were business partners, and Elena had dubbed herself with the nickname Grandma Diggity since she thought it sounded young and hip.
"You just met Griller and Bingo," Frank said. "The leader of the Night Hounds and his wife, remember?"
"The big pregnant lady with the tattoos," she said, nodding. "I remember now. She's going to pop on the back of that motorbike."
They're ending the poker run in Connorsville, Roy said. Then taking the Whitewater Valley train back here for dinner at the Cornerstone. Everybody should come along and meet the new business owner in town.
A motorbike, then a train ride? Elena put her hands on her hips. Bingo is gonna shake that baby right out today. Ben is probably working late, but I'll come by the Cornerstone, I said. Where's your partner in crime? I asked Roy. She's finishing knitting me a sweater to match my new shoes, Elena said, holding out a highlighter orange-clad foot. Jonna Fitzgerald was the other member of my action agency. She and Roy were glued together by animosity and strong will. They had a love-hate relationship and were rarely seen apart. Jonna had a penchant for knitting and shoplifting, but we kept her too busy to get into any trouble these days. I'm sure you'll stop traffic in a sweater that color, Brenda told Elena, then turned to me. Come get your mystery? Yes, let's do that. I hooked an arm through hers, and we headed across the road and down past the Soapy Savant to her used bookstore, Read and Reread. I had to get out of there before things got too wacky, she said. Wacky pretty much describes Elena's permanent state of being. We made our way inside the bookstore, where it was cool and smelled like old books. What do you think about this griller guy opening a bar in town? Brenda asked. I'm not a fan of those motorcycles rumbling around at all hours of the day and night, I said. My dogs will go ballistic. At least we know they won't be driving around drunk and end up in the canal. True, she said. Although buying a tow truck to fish them out wouldn't be a bad way to make some extra money. We both laughed at the thought. I wonder if Griller gets his name from making a mean burger on the grill, I said. I wouldn't be opposed to having another place to eat in town. I guess you can ask him tonight, Brenda said. I'll go over to the Cornerstone with you, since Will be too afraid to talk to anyone in a motorcycle club. It's not like they're a gang. You know it doesn't matter. He'll come around eventually. Maybe, I smirked. Maybe, she agreed, rolling her eyes. He did warm to you. I still think he has his doubts. Don't take it personally. I think he has his doubts about me, too, and we've been together the better part of a decade. I don't think he's going to be too happy with the motorcycle club being in town all the time. If you're worried about Will, just imagine my mother-in-law's response. My mother-in-law, Irene Hayman, had been the bullying president of the Daughters of Historical Metamora until just recently, when they decided the daughters should be more of a dinner club and less a dictatorship that ran the town with an iron fist. Irene is going to blow a gasket, Brenda said. She leaned over her cash counter with a devilish glint in her eyes. Can we call and tell her? I chuckled. Well, I'd love to be the one to break the news to her. I'm going to leave that to fate. She has a strict policy to always shoot the messenger. Brenda was right, though. When Irene found out a motorcycle club was opening a bar in Metamora, heads would roll. Chapter 2. When I got home from Read and Reread with my mystery novel, The Dog That Howled in the Night, and my double chocolate cookies from Betty, I lounged on the couch and indulged in both. I also brewed a cup of smoked butterscotch coffee I bought the day before from the Soapy Savant, our local coffee cafe. Our mayor, Pete Thompson, who we called Soapy, and his wife, Teresa, owned the Soapy Savant. Soapy made the food and coffee, and Teresa made bar soaps and lotions. The pairing was odd, the soap and coffee, not the couple, but odd worked for Metamora. I knew Soapy would be in for an earful all day long from everyone in town about the motorcycle bar that was going on. News traveled faster than a toupee in a windstorm around here. The book was good so far. It was set in the early 1900s and featured a young woman who heard a dog howling in the woods outside her bedroom window every night. It was a little spooky, actually, and I didn't think I'd be reading it at night in bed. My cell phone rang, and I picked it up from the coffee table to see it was my husband, Ben. Hey, I said, answering. I'm betting you guys got about 1 million calls at the station about the motorcycles in town. Am I right?
You are right,
he said. Ben was technically the only police officer who worked directly for Metamora. Since we were incorporated, the Brookville PD covered our town, but Ben was hired privately and he worked out of the Brookville station most of the time. It was a poker run, I told him. Roy set it up. He chuckled.
How do you know what a poker run is?
Betty told me. Anyway, the motorcycle club is a bunch of guys Roy goes to recovery meetings with. Their leader bought Ike's old place, and he's putting in a bar, but he isn't selling alcohol.
Well, that's good to hear. The no alcohol part, I mean. Riding a motorcycle under the influence is bad news. How's it going to be a bar and not serve alcohol, though?
I didn't ask, but from what I understand, all of those bikers will be supporting his efforts.
Which means they'll be swarming downtown like wasps day and night,
he said and sighed.
Which means the calls to complain are never going to end.
Which means we'll have a house full of barking, howling dogs 24/7. Roy invited a group of us to the Cornerstone for dinner tonight to meet the man and his wife who are opening the bar, Griller and Bingo.
Griller and Bingo?
Those are their names, and I guess she's pregnant and due any second.
That's probably why they're settling down here and opening a business,
he said.
I'd like to come and meet them, but I'm on duty until 10 tonight.
I know. I'll give them your regards.
Is Mia home?
No, she came home from work, changed, and left with Steph to go shopping. My stepdaughter was a senior in high school, and between cheerleading, work, and friends, she was never home anymore.
Are we sure she still lives there?
He asked. I'm pretty sure. Her clothes are still in her bedroom. Even if he joked about it, I knew he missed her being around the house as much as she used to be. I figured this was easing us into next year when she left us to go to college. Although Ben would never be prepared for that day. I wasn't sure I would be either. We chatted a few more minutes before I had to go back to work. After hanging up, I poked my head out of the back door to check on the dogs. When the air was crisp and the leaves fell, they knew winter was on the way, so they stayed outside as long as I let them. Gus was still in the corner of the fence, standing on his back legs with his paws on top, watching everything going on in town, and probably dreaming of chasing Metamora Mike and his duck pals. The twin tanks, Colby and Jack, were busy deconstructing an overgrown hydrangea beside the garage that I'd been meaning to prune back. I could cross that job off my list, I guess. Brutus was lying on the patio with Liam snuggled into a ball on his back, both of them asleep in the sunshine. I checked the time, 4:30. They had a few more hours before the sun began to sink. I figured I'd let them enjoy it while I showered and got ready to go to the Cornerstone. Roy sat, dead center, at a table in the Cornerstone restaurant's dining room. Beside him was a woman with hair that could be best described as calico, like a cat. It was dark in areas, reddish in others, and platinum on the ends. It was long and scraggly, and she wore a brown and white bandana tied over the top, like a do-rag. She was tiny on top, and her belly ballooned to epic, pregnant proportions. It had to be Bingo. Johanna sat to Roy's right, knitting as usual. Soapy and Teresa sat across the table from Roy and Johanna, and Brenda and I took the seats beside them, me across from Bingo, and Brenda across from an empty chair I assumed was where Griller would sit. We said hello to everyone, and Roy introduced us.
This here is Bingo, he said. She's got a baby that was due 2 days ago, so we're going to put some greasy fried chicken in her belly and see if that does the trick.
It should, Johanna said. That kid should slide right out with the amount of lard they fry the chicken in. Where's your husband? I asked. Griller, right? That's his name. Don't wear it out, she said, and laughed a deep, bellowing laugh. He's on his way. He had to run back to Connorsville to pick up our dog. They wouldn't let a dog ride on the train with us. Do you live close? Brenda asked. I was a bit confused on this point as well. No, we're checking up at a motel in Batesville for now. Batesville was a small town about 20 minutes south of us. We're moving into the Night Hounds bar day after tomorrow.
That's right, Soapy said. Like our place and Brenda's. It has 2 floors of living space above the main floor where the business will be.
It's a nice commute to work, Teresa said, laughing. Right downstairs. What kind of dog do you have? I asked. Trojan's a St. Bernard. A big one, Bingo said. And Griller's sidecar buddy. Tongue hanging out, slobbering in the wind.
First St. Bernard in town, Soapy said. We're a dog town. Teresa and I don't have one, but it seems like most everyone else does. Cam has 5.
5? Bingo asked. Where do you keep them all? Well, they're not all St. Bernard size, I said. I have one that's 5 pounds, so he's easy to squeeze in with the others. Another is my husband's canine police dog, so he's not home a lot. Your husband's a cop? She scowled. I hope he doesn't give us trouble. Cops like to hassle us. He won't give you trouble unless you cause it, I said, smiling. Some people had a deep aversion to police. We don't cause no trouble, she said. I know what people think of us. They see the bikes and the vests and don't want us around, but they don't even know us.
That's true, Soapy said. I have to admit to getting several calls today about the motorcycles in town and the plans for your bar, and it's not fair. You ought to be given a chance before people form opinions.
They don't want the noise, Johanna said, not one to sugarcoat things.
I don't either, but that doesn't mean I don't think you're an okay person. You seem okay to me so far.
You seem okay too, Bingo said. Although you must be colorblind to be using that color of yarn. Johanna was still finishing the traffic cone orange sweater for Elena. She sniffed in indignation.
This color was requested, I'll have you know.
Our server came around and got drink orders.
We have one more on the way,
Roy said, nodding toward the empty chair.
And I don't mean the baby.
He should be here any minute now, Bingo said, checking the time on her phone. I'll get you drinks and watch for him, the server said, and hustled away to get our beverages. He probably got to yakking with someone, Bingo said. He talked to the wall if nobody was around to listen.
Johanna snorted. We don't know anybody like that, do we, Roy? What are you suggesting?
Roy said.
That your mouth goes like the back end of a duck, she said. Non-stop.
Carl Finch, the owner of the Cornerstone, and my mom's fiancé, stopped by the table.
How's everybody doing tonight?
He put a hand on my shoulder and gave it a little squeeze in what was a show of affection for a soon-to-be stepdaughter, I guess. We all told him we were good, and Roy introduced him to Bingo.
We're just waiting for her other half to show up.
Any time now, Bingo said.
I'll bring out some onion rings to get you started while you wait. On the house, Carl said. It's always nice to meet another bar owner.
The Cornerstone had a bar attached to the restaurant, and it was the only one in town. I didn't think that would be changing when the non-alcoholic Night Hound bar opened. It sounded like it would be more of a hangout for their motorcycle club than an actual bar. I wasn't sure Carl had heard that part of the plan yet. They aren't serving alcohol, I said, making sure he realized he wouldn't be losing any of his bar business to Bingo and Griller.
Is that right?
Carl's head tilted and his brows crinkled.
What will you be serving?
He asked Bingo. We have a deal with Hank Jenkins and his barbecue shack. Since he's only open for lunch, we're going to have him cook for us during dinner.
You're serving food? Hank's food?
Carl clenched his teeth.
That's nice. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to get those onion rings.
He strode away from the table, and I heard Soapy make a low groan that only I could hear sitting beside him. Another 15 minutes passed, and we'd finished the onion rings and had drink refills. Bingo was visibly worried about Griller now. It only takes 10 minutes to get here from Connorsville, she said. He's not answering my texts, so I know he's on his bike, but where could he be? My phone rang, and I pulled it out of my back pocket. That's Ben, I said. Excuse me, I'm going to answer it outside. I wove my way through the tables and chairs and made my way out to the sidewalk, answering on the third ring.
Cam, Ben said, I have bad news. Is Bingo at the Cornerstone?
Don't tell me.
Someone pulled a hit and run on a motorcycle on Route 52. The man on the bike has the name Griller on the patch on the back of his denim vest.
I put my hand over my mouth. Is he dead?
Not yet. He's being transported to Brookville General, but it's bad.
What about the dog? I asked.
What dog?
He was bringing their St. Bernard Trojan in a sidecar. You didn't see a dog?
No, but I'll have the patrol officers on the lookout for him.
I knew my neighbors in Metamora weren't happy about the Night Hounds and the bar, but would they run Griller off the road to keep the motorcycle club out of town? Chapter 3. After Ben and Sheriff Raines from the Brookville PD arrived at the Cornerstone, I let Bingo know they wanted to speak with her outside. By the terrified look on her face, she had a good idea that something bad had happened. While the police were breaking the news to Bingo, I filled in my dinner companions on the hit and run. "She can't go back to that motel alone," Johanna said. "Not in a strange town, and that baby set to make its appearance any time. She'll have to come home with me."
"You?"
Roy asked, swinging his head to the right to look at her.
"What do you know about having babies?"
"More than you lousy lout." Johanna jabbed him with the pointy end of her knitting needle.
"Just because I ain't never had one of my own doesn't mean I'm ignorant to the ways of it."
"Roy," Teresa said in her soft, calm voice, "that was insensitive."
"Me? Insensitive?"
Roy sputtered.
"She's the one who name-called."
"When she's ready to leave Griller's side at the hospital and get some rest, we'll take her to the motel to pick up her belongings and then drop her off at Johnna's," I said, making the final decision.
"Let us know how we can help,"
Soapy said. Roy reached across and patted the table in front of Soapy.
"Keep an ear to the ground. Whoever did this needs to pay."
Soapy glanced over at me.
"Sounds like the Action Agency has work to do."
"First order of business," I said, "is to find Trojan. There wasn't a dog at the scene of the accident." Brenda got out her cell phone. "I'll text everyone in the town shop owners group message and tell them to keep an eye out for him."
"You have a group message?"
Roy asked. Then he straightened the collar on his vintage navy sports coat.
"The Action Agency has a group phone, text, instant message, chat thing, too. We're very tech-savvy."
"Please," Johanna said, smirking. "You wouldn't even know how to plug in a computer."
"You put the prongs into the holes like everything else,"
Roy said, making hand motions like he was shoving a plug into an outlet.
"Then you get on that global web www. place and look stuff up. I seen Logan do it 100 times.
Logan and Anna had been part of our team, but they moved away to college a couple months ago. Logan was a computer whiz.
"Yep, that sounds about right, Roy,"
Soapy said, looking to end the debate between him and Johanna.
"I'll be sure to keep an ear out for anybody talking about the hit and run." "I need to get over to the hospital,"
Roy said.
"I should make some calls to the Night Hounds on the way."
"I suppose you think I'm driving you?" Johanna said.
"You brought me here, so it's got to be you,"
he said.
"If this wasn't a matter of someone's life or death, I'd leave you here to find your own way,"
she said, tucking her knitting into her bag.
"I didn't even get my chicken, and have to put up with you on an empty stomach."
"I'm going home to grab a flashlight and some bug spray," I said. "I'll drive out to where the accident happened and start searching for Trojan." "Not alone, you won't," Brenda said. "I'll go with you."
"We'll meet you there," Teresa said. "You go on," Soapy told Roy and Johanna. "I'll settle the beverage tab with Carl." "That's mighty generous of you," Roy said. "Just keep us updated on Griller and Bingo."
Roy and Johanna promised to give us all an update as soon as they got to the hospital and took their leave. The server appeared at the table to find out why our party kept getting smaller when we'd been waiting for our one missing member. "We won't be having dinner after all," I told her. "An emergency came up."
"How much do we owe you for the drinks?"
Soapy asked. "Mr. Finch took care of the drinks and the onion rings," she said.
"He didn't need to do that," Soapy said. "Can you ask him to come over to our table? I'd like to thank him and say goodbye."
"He's not here," she said. "He left a while ago, right after talking to your table, actually."
"Oh."
Soapy blinked a few times, and I could almost see the gears grinding in his mind. Then he plastered on a smile.
"Okay, I'll catch him another time then."
"What was that all about?" I asked him when the server left. He quickly shook his head.
"Nothing. Ready, Teresa? We should be getting back. I forgot that the new guy was working. We shouldn't leave him alone too long. We'll help look for Trojan tomorrow if he isn't found tonight."
Teresa locked eyes with him and nodded. Nobody knew Soapy better than his wife, and if I could tell something was going on with him, she probably already knew what he was thinking. "We'll see you two soon, I'm sure," she said, smiling. As they walked away from the table, she looked back and gave us a little wave. "Something's up with Soapy," Brenda said. If it were any more obvious, it would bite a...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?